Whenever you hear me, when we come on the air, I'm still getting feedback.
Okay, so when I reroute the commercials through another track, right? That's probably what caused the feedback, is what I've noticed. So, like, you hear it a lot of times at the beginning because I allow you to hear the commercials, and then, you know what I'm saying, as I transition it, I don't turn it off as soon as it transitions. So I've been trying to turn it off more, but do you care about hearing it in the lead up right now, or because I can just turn it off and you don't need to hear, you won't hear the commercials, but it also won't give you any feedback.
Okay. What the reason I like to hear everything, Dylan, and we're up on Facebook. The reason I like to hear everything. Hey, Barbara Jean, and the Caribbean Queen, and Linda Boyle. How you doing? Was it Boito? How are you? Um, because I'm not in studio with you. The only way that I know that we're still connected, even if all the lights are on, is the by hearing the programming at the station. That's why I insist upon keeping it going. Okay. So when we get on the air, whatever you need to do to stop the feedback, so I don't have to say in the middle of my intro, I'm still getting feedback. Just whatever you need to do, whatever you need to do, just make sure that happens. Okay.
I will do that, but sometimes there's gonna be that delay just because I gotta get the transition right. But yeah, I'm just letting you know that is what it is.
Hyper aware. And just
Okay.
and get that done as quickly as possible. Because and you should speak to Devin and to Paul, but and Devin because Devin kills that at the beginning, so that's not an issue. So ask Devin what he does. Okay.
He just turns it off. That's it.
Whatever
Yeah, he got long.
he's doing it right. So speak with him so you can make sure that we get it done right. Because
Okay, it's cool. I'll just turn it down. That way you won't even hear it. And then I'll just tell you 3 minutes till time and stuff. So, because I can tell you if we're connected or not. That way I won't even have to turn it on or off. So, okay.
unless it's constant, it doesn't work for me. Let me say goodbye to Marnie and to Medi. Sending you much love. Thank you so much. Marnie, thank you so much for all that you do. Medi, thank you for all that you do. Pastor Williams, thank you so much for that powerful prayer.
Oh, you're very welcome. My pleasure.
As my mother says, you can't help somebody else without helping yourself. That helped me
For
so much
sure.
this morning. So thank you
Oh, to God be the glory. You're very welcome.
for all that God has done and continues to do. And I want to thank you
Yes.
for being
You're
obedient and being
welcome.
available. Thank you so much for that.
Oh, sure.
Thank you, thank you,
You're
thank you, thank you
welcome.
for that. That means so much.
It's my pleasure.
So, oh wow. Well, they are having a hard time in Brazil with COVID. When you see the
Mm-hmm.
poverty there, it just, you know,
Mm-hmm.
oh my gosh, it's just so much. So, okay. And wow. Now, what makes me, I must tell you, everybody, hey, Lorraine. And I think, Lorraine is on top of this. I think someone has a birthday today. Is that not right, Lorraine? Is it Adrian Paul? Happy birthday, girl. Everybody give Adrian some love. Pastor Williams, this is one of our morning stars. It's her birthday, everybody. Say happy birthday
Good
to
morning.
Adrian.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday, Adrian.
Oh, boy. Okay, did you let them go? Did you let
Yeah,
Medi and Marie go?
yeah. The only one left should be Reverend Williams.
Okay, good. All right. All right, all right, all right. So we got that.
I'm in the house.
Okay, thank you so much. They're about to start testing Pfizer this shot on these children. And that makes me, yeah, I don't like that.
I like
And I'm
that.
I'm not and I'm not an anti-vaxxer, y'all. But I think that's why I was asking Dr. Deborah Holden for a deeper explanation, because when you get vaccinated, you think you're inoculated, and that is not what this is. This really is a shot that mitigates this virus. And if people understood that, I think they'd behave very differently with this virus.
Mm.
You know, and so
Yes.
I
Yes.
I want to know what is going on, and because now they're about to start testing children.
Right.
No.
It's just
Uh,
every time you think you have a handle on this, it just,
you know,
30 seconds.
nobody knows what this thing is.
uh, no.
Nobody knows what this is. I mean, like at all. And so let's get real
Mm,
about it. We don't know what it is.
mm, mm, mm.
Happy birthday, Adrian. Everybody give Adrian some love today. She deserves that on this special day. How about that? All right. We got Pastor Williams, our favorite, right here
Yep,
with us. So, what a blessing. You
I'm
just bless
here.
us with plenty of
This is the
gratitude.
Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is March 26th, Friday, 2021. I'm Santita Jackson. This is the Santita Jackson Show. It's a joy to be with you today on this blessed day. It's a little cooler today in Chicago. We're going to have a high of 44 degrees. It's going to be cloudy. And it rained and stormed all last night in Minneapolis, St. Paul. 52 degrees, partly cloudy. All my beloveds up at AM 950 radio. I'm sending you much love. The voice of progressive Minnesota in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Gary Hines and all my people up there sending you much love, much love, much love. We got a ball coming up, and I'm going to tell you all about it when I get more details for AM 950 radio. Yes, I'm going to get dressed up for it. Can't wait. Boy, oh boy, what has happened overnight in Georgia? Midnight train to Georgia. It's midnight in Georgia, but it's darkest before the dawn. They signed a sweeping voting rights bill that guts people's voting rights. So we're going to talk about that today and the filibuster and President Biden's press conference. We've got a lot to talk about today. Of course, we're going to get our COVID-19 update, and we're going to be talking with Dr. Deborah Furholden about that and Pastor Tisha Williams. So, and of course, I want you to call or text me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. If you text me at that number, GWC Injury Lawyers is responsible for making that happen. So please be supportive of them. I am Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today. What's going on, everybody? Wow, the Dow closed down 234 points. The NASDAQ closed up 99 points. The S&P 500 closed down just a couple of points. So let's get to some of these headlines. So much is going on. Did you see President Biden's press conference yesterday? He had a hierarchy, everybody, on his on what he is going to be dealing with, what he's going to be tackling. And at the top of that hierarchy was COVID-19 and the economy. Then guns and immigration. That was very interesting. But he is pledging to administer 200 million coronavirus shots by the end of April. Wow. What do you think about that? He held that first press conference and it lasted for more than an hour. Talk about stamina. The Georgia governor, Brian Kemp, on Thursday signed a law that is a sweeping gutting of voting rights in the state of Georgia. This new law imposes new identification requirements for those who are casting ballots by mail. It curtails the use of drop boxes for absentee ballots, allows electors to challenge the eligibility of an unlimited number of voters, and requires counties to hold hearings on such challenges within 10 days. It makes it a crime for third-party groups to hand out food and water to voters standing in line. It blocks the use of mobile voting vans, and on and on and on it goes. And uh, there was a Georgia state lawmaker who was knocking on the door, trying to see the signing of the bill, which was being held in private, everybody. And Georgia State Representative Park Cannon was arrested, and now she has been charged with felonies for knocking on Governor Kemp's door as he signed the voter suppression bill. Yeah, she could be a felon. So we're going to see how that all works out. And Georgia activists are calling for a Coca-Cola boycott, everybody, over their deafening silence on voting rights. Of course, Coca-Cola is based in Atlanta, Georgia. What do you think about that, everybody? It's extraordinarily dangerous. Something else happened, everybody. The Georgia House passed a bill to give GOP lawmakers control of the election board. Essentially, it's self-dealing. We'll be talking about this at the bottom of the hour because I told you there are more than 43 states, more than 250 bills that are pulling back our voting rights, and we have got to pay attention because we're going to see that in about a year and a half when we have the 2022 midterm elections. Wow, everybody. 5 are dead as destructive tornadoes cut across Alabama, at a severe outbreak of severe weather. Destructive tornadoes tore across Alabama. 50 tornadoes tore across the region last week. The saddest march of our lives. Brazilians are lamenting the COVID devastation as critics are decrying President Bolsonaro. Uh, what is going on? It has now killed more than 300,000 citizens in Brazil, and they are breaking records every day. Vanderlei and all of our brothers and sisters who are over here on the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook. And please go to the YouTube page, the Santita Jackson Show page, and like and subscribe. And let us give our Brazilian brothers and sisters some love. Came across this story, which is very, very interesting. There's new research conducted by environmental justice scholars at Vermont's Bennington College, everybody, that get this. It reveals that between 2016 and 2020, the U.S. military oversaw the clandestine burning of more than 20 million pounds of aqueous firefighting foam in low-income communities around the country. Even though there is no evidence that incineration destroys the toxic forever chemicals that make up the foam and that are linked to cancer, developmental disorders, immune dysfunction, and infertility. The U.S. military between 2016 and 2020 ordered the burning of these toxic chemicals in poor neighborhoods. Wow, everybody. Pastor Tisha Williams, the struggle continues. It just can't stop, don't stop, won't stop. But you know what? In the midst of this, there is some good news. Pastor Tisha Williams, my sister beloved, the pastor of the First Baptist Church of Bridgehampton, New York. Of course, she's got a brilliant book, I See You, Sis. Next week we're going to talk about that because you know what? I think that women need some lifting, and we need to know that we're actually we're in the Bible. We're there.
That's it.
We're there.
Yeah. we are all in there.
We're all in there. We're all in there. So, what's the good news today?
So funny you should mention it. You're always right on target. I want to talk about a woman in the Bible today as we are coming to the end of Women's History Month, but yet this is a word that will encourage everybody. In the book, the Gospel of John, chapter 4, verse 29, a woman declares, "Come and see a man who told me everything I've ever done." Today, I just want to encourage everybody to go on and testify. This is this famous story about Jesus' encounter with a woman at the well. Go on and testify. A testimony is translated from the word material, which means evidence, but not just any evidence. If you were to look at the word, you would notice that the root is martyr. A martyr is a person who dies fighting for what they believe in. And so, in essence, a testimony may be defined here as the evidence of what nearly killed you. A testimony is the evidence of how you made it through your toughest trial, how you overcame your past, or perhaps how you're even still alive today. So, to put it simply, your testimony is your story, which includes the pain you've been through on the way to where you are today. And I have come to find that the longer I live and the more that I survive, Santita, I can't help but to testify. I'm pretty sure that you would say the same.
Yes.
This narrative begins with the unexpected, unorthodox encounter at the well. And this woman is only always identified by her location and her vocation, the woman at the well, because that's where she met Jesus. But if someone was writing your story today, what would they say about you? Would you be the man at the shelter, the woman at the bar, the man at the club, the woman at the unemployment office, the man at the precinct, the woman at the rehab facility? Is there anybody out there that's excited about the fact it ain't where you're from, it's where you're at? And you're excited about how God has brought you today? I'm excited about that, and that's why you have to testify. But this woman runs into the village and shares her testimony with people who shunned her, and I just couldn't understand that. But the answer to why she did it is found in this one word: everything. He told me everything I have ever done. Here, everything means each, every, any, all, the whole. Jesus doesn't only highlight the one thing she's ever done. He told her everything. she's ever done, meaning the good, the bad, and the ugly, everything. And you know what? That's what I love about Jesus right here. He knew everything and didn't treat her like any old thing. He knew everything and still engaged in conversation with her. He knew everything and didn't walk away. In a culture that is consumed with cancellation, he gave her affirmation. And I think we need to do a little bit more of that in this day and age. We're so quick to cancel people instead of affirming them. She didn't testify to Jesus. He testified to her. He told her everything. Here's a lesson for all of us. If you're going to tell a story, tell the whole story. If you're going to talk about someone having a child at a young age, talk about how they also successfully raised that child and put them through college. If you're going to tell it all. If you're going to talk about someone being incarcerated, talk about how they got out, went to school, got a job, and became a productive member of society. If you're going to tell it all. If you're going to talk about someone's drug addiction, talk about how they went to rehab, got sober, and now mentor others suffering from addiction. If you're going to tell it all. Tell everything. As the West African proverb states, until the lion tells the story, the hunter will always be the hero. And because of that, we see her spirits lift. She moves from protest to proclamation, condemnation to confession, miscreant to minister, wary to witness, from oh well at the well to it is well. So I simply came on this morning, Santita, to say, go on and testify. We all have a story. We've all been through something. Do you know today that your testimony has the power to bring somebody back to life? This one woman's testimony turned into a 2-day revival. It brought a whole village to Jesus. Your story has power today. So let me call a witness or two. Go on and testify for Women's History Month. When Elizabeth Warren testifies, she persists. When Maxine Waters testifies, we reclaim our time. When Santita Jackson testifies, we stay woke. When Dr. Holden testifies, we become medically literate. When Tarana Burke testifies, it's okay to say, me too. When Amanda Gorman testifies, as we grieve, we grow. Even as we hurt, we hope. And even as we tire, we try. Can I get a witness today? What's your story? What's your testimony? Go on and testify so someone knows they're not the only one. So someone knows they are not a failure. So someone knows trouble don't last always. So someone knows there's life after treatment, life after divorce, life after incarceration, life after COVID-19. Amen, somebody.
Yes.
So today, go on and testify.
Pastor Tisha Williams. Oh, what a blessing you are. You got to get her book. I see you, sis. These are the heroic women in the Bible. And I thank you for being a heroic woman in our time. Thank you
Oh, God bless
for
you.
being available to God with this anointing
Thank
that God has on your
you.
life. Thank you for spreading that anointing and letting it fall fresh on all of us.
Bless you. Thank
God
you. Thank you
bless you.
so much.
And of course, I know, come on off mute as you've been doing the Holy Ghost dance, Pastor. I know Dr. Deborah Fur Holden is trying to get up off the floor right now. Tell it all, everything. Tell it all, tell everything. You got to tell it all, not just, you can't cherry pick life. The book of James tells you not to do that. You got to count it all joy. Who, every hurt and every happiness makes you who you are, all of it. Dr. Deborah Fur Holden, world-renowned epidemiologist, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University. How you doing today?
I'm good now. If I wasn't good, I'm great. that was a good old. She does it every time. I was just talking to her because I've got quite a community of people growing around me as a function of going on this show. It's quite interesting, and I love these folks. Like, I love them. They get it. They really get it. And we were just talking about this. I said, I got to get this book because I've heard about so many different books and so many different things on the show. And you know me, I order books in multiples of 5. I either get 5, 10, or 15 to start. The question is, how moved am I when I get the book? Because I always have to give it to other people. All the things that I have going on and all the things that I'm doing, I find that oftentimes the people around me will be able to get through the book even before me, which encourages me to make the time to get through it. So I think I think I need 15. I think I need 15.
I think you do.
So I'm going to order my books today. I'm going to order my books today.
Oh,
and as she started to think, I thought of all the people who I think would love to have this book. which will encourage me to finish the book. So I'm gonna get my 15 today. That's my
Amen to
word.
that.
God
Amen to
be the
that.
glory.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Well,
Thank
let's
you.
jump right into this COVID conversation because she needs to have you come to, even if it's virtual, come to her church and speak about that because a lot of people called me after our conversation yesterday about vaccines and what they
Mm-hmm.
are and what this is and what this is not, what it does do and what it does not do because a lot of people are behaving well. They have the traditional idea of the vaccine in their head, but let me go to this first. Pfizer is beginning the COVID vaccine trial on infants and young kids, 6 months to
Mm-hmm.
11 years of age. How are we to interpret that?
I think that's a good thing. A lot of people have asked the question. I have a daughter who's pregnant. A lot of people have asked the question, how is it that if I'm pregnant, I can get the vaccine, but my child can't get the vaccine? It makes no sense. And I'll be honest with you, that's the one question that I haven't heard an answer to that even makes sense for me. The only thing I can come up with, and no one has said this, but when I looked, I thought, because pregnant women participated in the trial, some because they didn't even know they were pregnant at the time they participated, and some because they chose to. But it's common that you will not engage children, and depending on where we are, NIH defines children as anybody under 21. Anybody that's under 18 can participate without needing parental consent, which is why you'll find people 18 and over in the medical and clinical trials, like for vaccine development or new medication development. But having children or other vulnerable populations, so prisoners, people with mental disabilities or physical disabilities, et cetera, requires a whole nother layer and level of protection. So it makes good sense that most of the trials, the clinical trials for new medications development, which includes vaccines, would only include, otherwise healthy, able to consent, 18 and over adults. And so as a result, there's a lot of questions that remain unanswered. And I have it's sort of this weird thing that happens when kids turn 18 or when a young adult turns 21. They might gain some new rights in the world, right? Okay, now you can vote, or now you can run for office, or now you can rent a car, or now you can this. But nothing magical happens. Like my son turned 18, and bless his heart, he walked around like, I'm grown. I'm like, you ain't paid not near a bill in this house. And in my definition of grown folks pay bills. But nothing magical happened for him on 18, except he acquired a few new rights, right?
Let me stop you right there because I used to have Dr. Carl Bell. May he rest in power. One of the nation's leading psychiatrists, black psychiatrist, and he focused with all
Yeah,
stellar credentials. You know, Dr. Bell. He focused
yeah.
on the black community and on the poorest among us. And every time I had him on any show I've produced, he would say, "Now look, children." He said, basically everybody under 25 is a child. He said because your brain, everything doesn't connect until you're 25. He said, so, the behaviors of the young, you have to chalk it up to their immaturity. He said, because their brains are not mature. And which leads me to this, given that I heard him say this down through the years, I am very
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable um, with with giving this to a 6 month old or an 11-year old or an 11-year old or a 10-year old or a 7-year old. I really am. I just have to tell you that doesn't make me feel good. There's just too much about this that I don't know on something that has not been approved by the FDA yet, right? I
Well,
don't.
let's look at
So
it this way,
help me
though.
with
Here
that.
we go.
Okay.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. And this whole thing has taught me to have a lot more room for people's opinions, especially opinions that I know ultimately may not serve them medically or health
Yeah.
wise, because there's a lot that's happening. And so I think your opinion is valid, but here's the real deal: we give children vaccines all the time. And the reason we give children vaccines all the time is because what we do know is the vaccine in almost every single instance is a much better outcome for a child than the disease itself.
True, but
so what we are beginning to learn now
okay.
is that with COVID-19, there was this lie that somehow kids were, superheroes with the virus.
Immune.
That they would get it and they would be just fine. Or they would, they wouldn't even get it. And what we were finding out was, in fact, the kids are very much able to get the virus. The younger you are, the stronger your immune system is, the healthier you are, the more likely it is that your body will do a really good and efficient job of fighting it off. So children are young. They're strong. These 9, 10-year-olds, I think their immune systems are operating optimally because they've been exposed to things. Their immune systems have been trained. It's a real sweet spot for kids. But it doesn't mean that they're not contracting it. It doesn't mean that they're not spreading it. And then lo and behold, we now have case reports of children who've gotten it, children who've died from it, from the direct results or some secondary impact. And then we also now are finding that we've even got children who are long haulers. So as we go and grow in this epidemic, we're learning more. And I think what that has done is heighten the need to make sure that children have the opportunity for the protection of prevention, which is what the vaccine is.
And what I'd like for us to do is have a more extended conversation about vaccines and children. Because, there are a lot of debates about not vaccinating children, but the delivery, how they are delivered today. My mother got her children vaccinated 40, 50 years ago. And I asked her, because she has raised 5 children successfully to maturity. There's a lot of debate. And just being a talk show host, I get inundated with all kinds of questions. And coming out of the civil rights movement and just really given how my father's ministry has been structured, people come to us with a lot. And people have had a lot of questions about how these vaccines are delivered. And I'd like to bring on and maybe bring together some of these mothers whose children have had what they believe is vaccine industry, but Big Pharma pushes back against it, even though Big Pharma was going broke in the 80s, Dr. Verholden. And that's why President Reagan signed into law a ban on suing Big Pharma. So now the taxpayer has to pay, so it's like there's a lot. And that's why I'm so grateful that you're here every day helping us to tease this out because we're suffering. We're suffering. We're struggling. I have literally 30 seconds and they belong to you.
Well, I want to let people know on Saturday, April 3rd, I'm actually putting together a panel to talk specifically about vaccines. And we're doing it this soon because it's needed, it's timely, it's relevant right now to look at the impact of vaccines and what we know already for vaccines in pregnant and lactating women and for children at different ages and stages of development. And so, during the conversation, I'll make sure that I send you that information. And since Peter, maybe we can pick this up here and unpack it. And I could even invite a colleague or so who's expert.
Absolutely.
Because there are expert OBGYNs and pediatricians who've really got the finger on the pulse of this.
And next week we're going to do that because I also want to know why women are more susceptible to being long haulers. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. Thank you, Doctor, because sometimes I'm going to have to play I'm not going to say the devil's advocate. I want to bring other views because we keep making people who are asking questions, we keep demonizing them, and that is wrong. Because different people
wrong.
Reverend Yuri is here in the attorney council.
Okay, so I'm going to let Pastor Williams. Are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Well, you know what?
I'm outside right now.
I hear you. But I'm going to let you and Dr. Verholden go because I'm going to bring them on. But you all, everybody say hello to Pastor Yuri, Reverend Dr. Yuri Esquire, and Attorney C.K. Hoffler. How you doing, Attorney Hoffler?
Hello. Good morning.
Reverend Dr. Yuri. Everybody say hello before I let these ladies go.
I'm only saying hi to. I'm only saying hi to
Good
CK
morning.
because I'm in. Hi CK. I'm only saying hi to CK because I'm in Baltimore, and Pastor Yuri's supposed to be my friend, my guy, and I haven't seen him, so I'm not saying hi to him. Only good morning, CK.
Oh,
Yeah.
Attorney Hoffer's on there.
Yeah, I did that. Yeah, I did.
okay.
I know that's petty, but
No, you
you
did
know,
that.
it is Friday,
He's
so
wrong. He's
yeah.
wrong. He's wrong. He ain't giving you no love, girl. Come on. He's not giving.
Not even the iota, not even a drop of it either. Not a drop.
What do you have to say for yourself, Pastor Yuri?
I said good morning, Santita. That's what I said. Hey, good.
He's petty too.
Ooh, shady shade. Ow. Shady shade. Shady shade. Shady shade. Shady shade. Shady shade.
That's all of that seat pleasant and Flint and all of that kind of rolling out. Look.
Ow. Ow. Oh. Okay.
Y'all know he works in Flint too, because he's everywhere. But yeah, but he don't make time for friends. So I'm just gonna leave it right there. I am gonna drop off Santita, but I'm gonna listen in online. Okay.
Oh, please.
Y'all have a great rest of the show.
Sending you much love, my dear sister. Baby sister.
All right.
Have a great day, everyone. Thank you,
you, Pastor Williams. You are, both of you, you all are blessings. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Okay.
Blessings to you. Okay, who do I have? I have Pastor Yuri. Do I have Attorney Connolly?
Yeah, Attorney Connolly and
Aaron is here.
All right, how you doing, Miss Aaron?
I am great this morning. How is everyone? Good morning.
She's got her son, who is an artist. Love it. Hello.
Yes.
He's
ballet recital yesterday.
Oh, look, I love it. You know, the when I was in high school, and our high school was really cutting edge. What, 40 years ago, they had the football players were required to take ballet. People don't realize how strengthening ballet is, and
it really is
how rigorous it is. Oh yeah, yeah. These are some of the strongest people in the world, but the sweet spot was that they sold tickets to the recital every spring. Now it was packed out. They had to add shows because we wanted to see those football players in tights. We were like, "This is too rich. Love it." But they all said, it really helped them.
He's also a hockey player, so it does help the flexibility on the ice as well.
And the strength, it helped them. They said, actually, I'm a better player because I thought Mr. Prince was crazy when he made us do it. But
10 seconds.
So everybody stand by. We're going to be talking about the president's press conference and Georgia. We've got Georgia on our minds today. Everybody like and share, and please go to.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody, the Santita Jackson Show. I'm Santita Jackson here on WCPT 820 in Chicago, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Call me at 773-763-WCPT, 773-763-9278. Let's talk about President Biden's press conference, which lasted for more than an hour, just a little more than an hour. It was very interesting that he prioritized COVID relief and the administration of 200 million shots of the COVID shot. And really, he prioritized that and economic recovery over guns and immigration. Interesting. Very, very interesting. He did have a hierarchy of his priorities. And then, of course, in the midst of all of that, we saw what happened in Georgia. So we've got a whole mixed bag of issues to deal with today, but really they're all kind of flowing from the same place. And so let's start with, of course, we've got Pastor Reverend Dr. Todd Yuri, Esquire, from the Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore, Maryland. He's also from Rainbow Push and the chair of Rainbow Push and the president of the National Bar Association, the largest and oldest Black bar association in the world, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, and one of our top political organizers and strategists really in the country, Attorney Aaron Connolly. We're so excited to have you with us all the time, of course, from Covenant Strategies. Let me start with you. Aaron, what did you see in the press conference yesterday? And were you surprised by anything that you saw?
Well, I just think as it's nice to see our president out in front of reporters answering questions and doing so with some humility, some grace, some humor. And I think that was the biggest relief to see that and to quiet some of the people that have been critical of the president doing his work versus coming out and answering questions from the press often. The thing that I noted was I would say the lack of focus on what we see going on behind the scenes in foreign affairs. And as a part of a military family, I would have liked to hear a little bit more of that outside of what we're talking about at our border. But I don't think there were big surprises for me. I think it was a proud moment for many Americans, and I think we need to hear more from our president on certain issues that we talk about a lot on this show, and that I know many of your guests write about quite often, and we see action on those domestic issues locally and at a state level, especially here in Illinois. But I would like to hear a little bit more about, outside of the $1,400, what we're going to do to help working Americans make ends meet outside of the COVID crisis, and putting some real measures in place to have a structure of economic empowerment for Americans. I think that would be the thing that I would like to hear more about.
So you would prioritize that. And of course, as a member of a military family where we have payday loan centers outside the bases because they are struggling.
Exactly.
And we are debating over
many-
Afghanistan. And would you like to hear more about that? Like, when are we getting out of this? How is that going to happen?
Well, and support for those folks and our working families when we're out of this crisis, right? This has been, when we talk about mental health care, and we're only doing it in the context many times of a tragedy like we saw in Atlanta, like we saw in Colorado this week. We need to talk about comprehensive mental health care for not only our returning soldiers, but also all of our citizens, right? We can't keep operating in a cycle of crisis. And I think economic empowerment is a big part of that. If you know that you have health insurance and you can pay that extra $40 to go see somebody and get help, or make sure you can afford your medication, it's a lot easier to have conversations about maintaining mental health and stability for all of our citizens. And as we see tragically this week, that has a violent end. And unfortunately, we've become very desensitized to a lot of this violence, but I think that's a foundational piece that we need to address comprehensively and not just reactively.
Attorney C.K. Hoffler, what did you hear yesterday? I mean, everyone was really, anticipation, the old song by Carly Simon, everybody wanted to see, I guess, if he'd be able to get through it, because he has all these, verbal malapropisms, right? It is almost he's almost Bushian, and just he kind of garbles up his words, and people wanted to know. And then, of course, we were very concerned when we saw him falling last week. And there's just a lot of concerns you always have about the president, right? But he got through it, and it was, to stand there for an hour to answer those questions is not an easy thing. What did you get from the press conference yesterday?
Well, first of all, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Santita, for addressing this really, really important issue. I waited. My stomach was in knots a little bit because I was just hoping he could get through it, and he did, and I'm happy about that. I think that there were some moments that I truly appreciated because I'm here in Georgia, and because of not just the recent hate crimes, the hate crimes surrounding the shooting at the spas where 8 people were brutally killed. And because of what the governor did by signing into law, perhaps one of the most draconian laws and voter suppressive laws that this country's ever seen. Because of that, I was waiting in anticipation to hear about that. And he did address that. I know that I'm just in one state, and that's just one of the areas that he needed to touch on. He touched on COVID, and that was good. He just has a really different rhythm. And so I'm becoming more accustomed to his rhythm because when he was vice president and when I've heard him speak before, he's never really been the main event. So when he made blunders or when he had a different rhythm, I didn't really, because he was the main event, if you will, I didn't focus so much on it. But I did today and yesterday. And at the end of the day, his heart is in the right place. I think he delivered a good message to the American people. I think he answered questions. His humor is a little different, so I don't know if everybody really gets that all the time, but I think people will become accustomed to it. But it was refreshing as compared to the previous president. I think for me, I was, we can't help it. We're not comparing, but we're comparing how we felt when our president spoke. And I felt by and large good. In terms of the priority, you mentioned that in your opening remarks. I would have liked to see, some of the racial and social injustice a little bit higher up on the list of priorities, but I don't think it's not a priority. They are addressing a lot of concerns. I also would like to see healthcare reform at the top, and he did address COVID, so I suppose that was his way of addressing it. I would like to see, however, a stronger focus. He was very passionate, and he was very just disgusted about what the governor of Georgia had done, and the fact that a black woman was arrested, a Democratic lawmaker. That was a painful reminder of just how bad this law is that is being replicated throughout the country. So I think on a scale of 1 to 10, I gave him an 8. And the reason why I gave him an 8 was because not necessarily for his performance, but for addressing a lot of issues of importance to the American people, but also just being there and speaking to the American people about these issues, these crisis issues. I hope that he does address and explains to us what's happening internationally in a more cohesive or not coherent, but comprehensive way, because I think that is what happens to our military, and the money and the funds that we are spending on these military activities are also of concern to the American public, especially given some of the crises that we have here domestically. So I thought he did pretty well. The 8, which is a pretty high number, is simply based on the fact that I was happy to hear a president speak about many issues of concern to our community, but I would have liked to have heard more from him on some of the domestic issues, but he at least addressed them and he answered the questions, and that's something we haven't seen in a long time.
Maybe we need to raise the bar. That's there's a lot going on.
Well, we do need to raise the bar, and I think we first had to get it out there. We had to get him out there, and I think hopefully there'll be people who will work with him. There's room for improvement, but I looked at it from a global standpoint. I tried to overlook some of the other stuff, and the fact that he's addressing some of the issues. I want to see more than talk. That's how I look at it. I want to see more than talk because, like all of us, we're sitting in states where we are on the verge of. I feel like in Georgia, I feel like I'm on the verge of a civil unrest. I don't want to say a civil war because that's too strong, but there's so much uneasiness, unhappiness, discontent, feeling of oppression. The only word I can think of is oppression. You feel when you see that kind of law put into action. What's next? What's next? And so we've got to reverse that. And the only way to reverse it is through the passage of a federal Voting Rights Act that restores a lot of the rights that were lost with the Shelby County versus Holder case and then some. Because with the passage of what's pending now, that would erase 4/5 of all that nonsense that the governor signed into law. It would erase it.
Well, we're going to talk about that shortly, because there's a whole lot tucked in. No, because this is something. Anytime you have a state representative who's arrested and charged with felonies, we got an issue. But before we get to that, because that's a lot to talk about, because we're in the midst of the 2022 season, everybody. I keep talking about that. And 43
Yeah.
states around the country have 250 pieces of legislation similar or akin to what happened in Georgia, what was passed yesterday, in secret. In secret. But first, Reverend Yeri, what are your thoughts on the press conference yesterday? I just think it's important for us to react to what we saw because we are in times that are so challenging that every little thing that we see, everything that we hear, really is important.
Well, good morning, Santita, and to my colleagues and Madam Chair, Sister Aaron, and your listeners. A couple of things about the press conference is there's the messaging in the room, and then there's the messaging beyond the room. And as I listened to President Biden, he seemed to be keenly aware of the universe of folks who are listening. And so he spoke to the things that, the thing about press conferences is that the first objective is to live long enough to have another one, right?
Yes.
Because if the first one is a disaster, you're going to take your lumps in a news cycle that could be unrelenting and actually put you on your heels when it comes to messaging. And a lot of what this administration has focused on is messaging, as we can see from yesterday's press conference, is they do not yet have a clear message around immigration and what needs to be done with what we're seeing again, according to some on the southern border. But in terms of where he tried to prioritize in framing his own issues, he focused on his strength, which is the COVID response. That's not surprising, because you don't let go of a message if there's still some bandwidth to leverage it in the space, right? So he's pushing the vaccine numbers. He's going to exceed his first 100-day numbers. He's got to kind of leverage and lengthen that timeline, because he also knows how to count. He knows that 50-50 is good for at least who's controlling the floor agenda, but it's going to be a huge obstacle for what he wants to get accomplished. And so if HR 1, HR 4, HR 40, the For the People Act, it's now S1 on the Senate side, there's some internal issues that he's got to message very carefully. The reason I think we did not hear a whole lot about what's going on with racial justice is on yesterday you had the committee vote or an update on Kristen Clark and I believe Benita Gupta. Mm-hmm. And so he had to be very sensitive that he did not antagonize a Senate that still is not really kind of set itself up for what kind of Senate it will be, even though Schumer is responsible for what the business will look like. And it appeared to me that President Biden was clearly and keenly aware of how to avoid the potholes in the street when it came to engaging the press. And so overall, I think we got to remember he's a creature of the Senate. He also knows that the Senate is going to be his Achilles heel. So he's speaking to the things that he knows. His favorite date in 2021 will be October 1st, the start of the new fiscal year, because that's the next time he can put a reconciliation bill on the floor to be able to move infrastructure. What is infrastructure going to be? As I've assessed this, because we've seen $15 an hour get left behind, but remember, one of the first executive orders that he signed was to require government contractors to pay a minimum of $15 an hour. And so he's recognizing that if he gets an infrastructure bill that's tied to federal money with that, if it turns into kind of a federal jobs bill light, at least for what appears to be about a $3 trillion ask that can affect widely all 50 states. With it, he'll get some movement on $15 an hour. He'll get some movement on folks being able to work. He'll get some movement on states getting some necessary infrastructure attention, because his target, he understands that he cannot spend all 4 years of what he at least indicates he hopes to be a first term. He cannot spend it with a 50-50 split in the Senate. He cannot look forward to October 1st every year, because it will leave a lot of the substantive policy issues around governing, elections, immigration, those things that cannot be included in a reconciliation bill, those things have to be addressed, and he's got to change the numbers. And until the numbers change, you got to play the hand that you dealt, not the hand that you wish you had.
Well, let's move on to Georgia. Georgia on our minds. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, what happened in Georgia? Specifically, what was signed into law last night?
Well, what was signed into law globally was an embarrassing law that will disproportionately, once again, Black and brown people in terms of their ability to vote, working class people in terms of their ability to vote, the least of these in terms of their ability to vote, because it basically takes out all of the things that enabled people to vote in the last presidential election and the last Senate runoff race, all of the things that made it possible to vote during COVID, such as, since we anticipated long lines, sometimes 15-hour lines in some places, and people were just standing there, elderly were standing there, getting food, getting water, something so basic, that's out. You will not be able to, and when you break a law, there are penalties for breaking a law. So you won't be able to do certain things, such as, even if you're in line for 25 hours, you just have to just collapse. And if you don't have, you better have 10, 15, 20 bottles of water yourself, because no one can bring you water. No one can help you out in line. That's number one. Number two, the polling stations are going to be closed by 5 o'clock in general. So if you have a job, and if you are, again, we're not talking about people who have the ability and flexibility as I may be, or as I may have, to just say, well, I'm going to vote now any time of the day, and just go and wait in line and vote. Most people, most working people, get off at 5 o'clock, maybe 4 o'clock. And certainly, if you think about the people that carried the day in the presidential elections in Georgia, as well as those who carried the day in the Senate runoff election in Georgia, they were by and large the different Black and brown people and young people who would not have the flexibility necessarily and the ability to just say, I'm going to leave the office at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, or whatever time to get in line to vote. Other things such as the ballot boxes that these are things that made a difference, especially during COVID. But even if you don't have COVID, absentee ballots. So they're going back to this is more draconian than what went on during Jim Crow. We have to go back to a time. We have to think back to a time before the Voting Rights Act, before Black people had the right to vote, before there was a right to vote. What did we do? How did we live? How do we survive? You got to go back into that mindset, because that's really the mindset. So even with drop boxes, absentee ballots, things of that nature that are basic and fundamental, this is nothing new. Those have been stripped in terms of the wide access to them. Absentee ballots, and that's not anything new. We've been voting in this country via absentee ballots forever. All of the things that made a difference, for instance, if there needs to be a voting place that needs to be opened for a longer period of time, because let's say it opened at 12 noon as opposed to 7 o'clock because of issues that the state had, because of issues that the Secretary of State didn't do something right and it didn't open. To enable that voting precinct to stay open later, there's got to be a court order. You've got to go through all of these measures, and all of that together, and there are other things that are crazy about this, but I've just touched on the big things, will cause an environment where it's very, very difficult for people to vote. In addition to that, you will have to have, like with the absentee ballot, just some of the witness requirements will be more stringent. And so there will be a lot of discretion given to those who are looking, those commissions that are looking, and groups of people looking at the ballots, that would enable them to really just throw out so many ballots without really being checked. So what does that mean? That means that he or she in power, the group in power, is going to have the power to determine whose ballots are valid, whose are not, and who will vote. And that is simply not what we should, that is not what we should have in this country or any country.
Well, before you go and take care of I've taken him on as one of my godchildren. This artist, this burgeoning artist, John, your son, Aaron Connolly, because you've been seeing this all over the country. Um,
Yes.
what should we? You've got the last 3 minutes belong to you. I mean, because we now see that the Georgia House also passed a bill giving the lawmakers control of the election board, not the Secretary of State. I
Yes.
mean, this is crazy.
Yeah, it's unprecedented from a structural standpoint with regards to state government, and shows the dire need to reestablish a version of the Voting Rights Act for our modern times, right? We see that in states like Georgia, Arizona has been trying to take away the permanent early voter list, which is a very successful mail-in ballot program that most people are a part of. They're trying to make it not permanent and take everybody off of that list. And we see other attacks in other states when they believe that people aren't paying attention, right? And that is why we need this For the People Act, and we need federal leadership on this. First of all, let's make Election Day a holiday. At least our federal elections, we should make it a federal paid holiday so all of us can vote. So any of these points are now moot. The 5 o'clock requirement, if everybody's off, it has less of an impact, right? We have to start lobbying for things that are going to take away some of the power of these nefarious individuals who really just are trying to silence people. And that is the intent of this. And hopefully there will be some litigation associated with some of these bills. But that's really what they're trying to do. There was a state lawmaker in Arizona who was quoted saying that they don't care about the quantity of votes. They want to make sure the votes are quality. So who's determining what a quality vote is? And what is the process for that? That's not how America works. That's not how it should work. And I was very relieved to see some of the local efforts in Georgia saying that they're going to put a recall effort in motion for the governor of Georgia and some other measures that will undermine some of these laws. But it's, again, I want to talk about the impact of these local boards, these state legislatures, right? We need to start looking more carefully at these statewide seats because these people have enormous power. And thankfully
and
in Arizona,
ignore
they've been
them.
able to.
Right.
In the
last minute,
thank you for bringing it up on your show. It's important that we're having this conversation, but you're right. We ignore it. We pretend that it's not happening and act surprised as a general public.
Well, but Attorney
Connolly, not included in
we also hear we hear congressmen, congresswomen, senator, and we just say, oh, well, they're in Washington. I'm like, no. The people who control how you live are in your state capital, right? So, literally.
In your state capital, on your local county board,
yes.
on there's many local authorities that we can take pieces back of and have influence. And I think there's been a progressive movement, for example, in Chicago that's done a great job in looking at these smaller cities and looking at their councils. We see, for example, in Evanston, they just approved a reparations program. Okay, so there's things that we can do at the local level, but we have to take control and make sure that we're prioritizing good candidates, good structures around them, people that are really rallying around the community. And I think that's going to be the next level of focus for the local parties and really where they can make the most impact. So I hope that that's the case. In the meantime, I hope we can all mobilize around what needs to be done in Georgia to either move past these laws or help those folks vote.
And pay attention everywhere. Arizona, everywhere. It's happening in 43 states. More of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. Aaron, thank you so much. I'm going to call you a little bit later today because there's something else I want to do that we need to do in Chicago. Well, at least it needs to come out of Chicago.
I'm here for it.
Yeah. It needs to come out of Chicago.
Give me a call.
So thank you so much.
And I just want to say, and before you leave, just know that there's also, as you can anticipate, legal action. People are coalescing that is contemplated as well in terms of what's happening in Georgia. So This is just the tip of the iceberg. But that it happened in Georgia in this way, even though it's everywhere, Santita, 43 states, and others will jump on the bandwagon too. It's that this bill has passed, and it's as bad as it is, and then having a black woman who's a lawmaker being arrested and being charged away, being closed out
with
having the
felonies.
picture of the governor, the felonies, and the picture of the governor, and 4 or 5 white men standing around. The whole thing takes you back, and it feels like oppression.
But you know
That's
what?
what it feels like.
I think it takes us back, but it moves us forward. I think we have to realize just how deep and wide this issue is. This is a 500-year-old problem. And it's not going to be resolved in one fell swoop. And everybody's got to buy in. Everybody's got skin in the game. That's why even after January 20th, everybody was excited about the inauguration. We kept saying on this show, there's work to do, everybody. There's work to do. Raphael Warnock is running for re-election right now. One of the most frustrating aspects of being in Congress for my brother was that he said, my term, I have a 2-year term. I've got to walk out of one election literally the next day getting signatures for my next election. Then I get to Congress and I have got the DCCC on my back because they want $100,000 to $200,000 just from me. And that was Rahm Emanuel. That was his claim to fame when Jesse was in Congress, that he was a battering ram, pulling money from people, which can compromise your votes, right? Because who can you imagine coming from a poor district and you've got to raise that kind of money? I mean, it's crazy. So I mean, I think we're going to have to really dig down deep and really understand how this system works, and get involved and understand everybody. We're on Facebook Live right now. You got to get involved. Stay involved. Because what happened in Georgia, Chicago, come on now. You know that will happen here. We just barely got
Florida.
free.
First it's going to happen in all the swing states. Number one, it's going to happen in all the swing states. This is a plan that was concocted before the presidential elections, just as a safety net, just in case.
Absolutely. But you know what? Let me let Aaron go. Stay right here because I'm trying to get everything queued up for the next hour.
Thank you all.
Oh no, Aaron, I'm going to call you a little bit later. Thank you, Aaron. Okay, stay right there, everybody. Dylan, are we ready for the next hour?
Yes, Mr. Daly and Fancher's on.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much.
But a caller named Alfredo.
Okay, there you go. David Daly?
Good morning.
Oh boy, we are after, aren't we? Yes, and
we most certainly are.
Oh my gosh, everybody! Of course, you're on with Attorney C.K. Hoffler. You know C.K. Hoffler from the National Bar Association, Chair of Rainbow Push.
Good morning.
Vice President of Rainbow Push, and of course, Reverend Dr. Todd Urey, Esquire, and Attorney Mark Fancher, brilliant civil libertarian and civil rights lawyer. So glad to have you all on here today, and you all are going to make my life so much easier because I'm just going to be able to lean back with all of this brilliance and learn. Take some notes. I love it. Keep talking to each other, everybody. We're on Facebook Live. Hey, everybody. Yeah. Happy birthday, Adrian. Everybody give Adrian Paul some love. It is her birthday. Thank you, Lorraine. Lorraine and Stanley have been doing a bang-up job. So everybody here, say happy birthday, Adrian. Come on, everybody. Say happy birthday, Adrian.
Happy birthday, Adrian.
Happy birthday, Adrian.
Oh.
And Adrian, if I could sing, I would sing, but it would not be a good thing.
Oh, so you're not going to pull a Jesse Jr.
No.
He feels it. And he feels he can dance like Michael Jackson, too. There you go. I'm telling on my brother. You remember the red Beat It jacket?
Yeah.
Jesse bought that red Beat It jacket. Oh, and he was so proud. And he said he was late coming down to dinner. We had dinner promptly at 6. And he, was waiting upstairs. And we were like, what? Come on. Mom's rung the bell, literally. Come on, let's go. He said, no, I'll be right down. And we were like, you're not going to wear that jacket, are you? He said, yes, I am. I'm going to wear this jacket. And they're going to love it. They're going to love it. Honey, my father, he said, I'm spending all this money to send you to this school in Washington, D.C. You come down. Don't you disrespect me. You're not a singer. You're not a dancer. You ain't got that kind of talent. Don't you dare come in like you're in show business coming to this table. What's wrong with you, boy? And Johnny, Yusuf, Jackie, and Jackie even got it. We just looked at him and said, "We told you. We told you. We told you." Boom. And he looked at us for support. Everybody literally looked away. So you better go upstairs and take off that jacket you spent all this money on, thinking you look like Michael Jackson. Get out of here. Oh,
Well, did he moonwalk up the stairs?
Of course not, but he moonwalked when he came down the stairs, Mark. Yes, he did. Wait a minute afterwards, because my father was hot. He said, "You have to put on a tie and a jacket to come down to get around the school." He said, "You mean to tell me you're gonna come to our dining room table looking like this? Are you crazy?" Oh, my parents were funny. And the thing is, it's so funny. They were so young, too. And all these reporters who'd come to the house would always remark, your parents are very conservative. I'm like, black folks are conservative. I don't know, what are you talking about? You're not going to come here and do all this wild off the rail stuff in our house. That's crazy. It does not work. And you got your grandmama coming too. At the time, both of them were alive. My great grandmother was alive. Whew. No, big fun. But what happened in Georgia? We've got a lot to talk about, everybody, because we're in the throes of the 2020 election. And this is happening in 43 states. There are more than 250 pieces of legislation akin to this. And if you could imagine how horrifying it was to watch this state representative knocking on the door, not banging, and she had the right to bang on the door.
This is the Santita Jackson
Hey, everybody.
Show.
Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. 6 minutes after the hour, right here in Chicago, WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I'm Santita Jackson. It's a joy to be with you today. I want you to call me or text me at 773 763 9278 773 763. WCPT, WCPT, GWC Injury Lawyers gives you the opportunity to text to that number. I want to hear from you today. What do you think about these laws? It's not just Georgia, everybody. These horrific rollback on our voting rights, on our abilities to vote. That's happening all over the country. 43 states, 250 pieces of legislation. After the big win of the presidency, the state legislators went to work. And they are stripping us of our ability to vote. What do you think about that? What do you think about that? And if it's Georgia today, it's coming to a state, city, town near you. I mean, where you live. And I want to know what you think about what happened in Georgia. What do you think about a legislator a governor who was signing the legislation in secret, and a legislator who was knocking on the door to get in because, of course, she represents Georgians. And she was arrested and charged with felonies. She's got a court case, everybody. She's got a case. She had to lawyer up last night. Think about that, everybody. I'm Santita Jackson, and in Chicago, we're going to have a high of 44 degrees. It will be cloudy. In Minneapolis, St. Paul, a high of 52 degrees, partly cloudy. The Dow closed down 234 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed up 99 points. The S&P 500 closed down 2 points. Let's get to some of these headlines. President Biden promised to tackle the nation's crises, but he says some may have to wait. Indeed, he had a hierarchy of crises. COVID-19, 200 million shots in the next 100 days, and the economy. Now, guns and immigration, even though he said those issues basically are intractable, but he did give that to Vice President Harris. So, wow, that's going to be very, very interesting. But there are a lot of issues at play, and it was an hour-long press conference, and we're going to continue to see how that plays out. Well, the governor of Georgia signed into law a sweeping voting bill that, among other things, impose new identification requirements for those casting ballots by mail, blocks the use of mobile voting vans, makes it a crime for third-party groups to hand out food and water to voters standing in line, and so many other things that have been blocked. We have a tremendous panel talking about that today, and we're going to get to that in just a couple minutes. Georgia State Representative Park Cannon was arrested while trying to watch the governor sign a voting new bill, of this new voting bill. She was knocking on the door trying to get in. She was arrested and charged with 2 felonies. What do you think about that? What do you think about the calls for people to boycott Coca Cola? They have what many activists are saying a deafening silence on this voting rights fight. And of course, Coca Cola is based in Atlanta. What should they do? Should we not choke on Coke? I want to know what you think. Call me, text me at 773 WCPT. And what about the Georgia House, which passed the bill to give GOP lawmakers control of the election board? Not the Secretary of State. Oh boy, we've got a whole lot to talk about today. 5 people are dead as the destructive tornadoes tore through Alabama. They have had 50 tornadoes since last week. We're praying for our brothers and sisters down in Atlanta, and we're praying for our brothers and sisters down in Brazil. They are really struggling with COVID-19. More than 300,000 of their citizens have died. Wow. And many people are blaming the current president, the conservative President Bolsonaro. They're saying that he is doing a horrible job at mitigating this virus. Vaccine purchases and distributions. And what about the U.S. military? It turns out between 2016 and 2020, get this, everybody, according to new research conducted by environmental justice scholars at Vermont's Bennington College, the U.S. military oversaw the clandestine, secret burning of more than 20 million pounds of aqueous firefighting foam. Now, mind you, those foams are linked to, and they never degrade. They never degrade. They are linked to cancer, developmental disorders, immune dysfunction, and infertility. And they were burned and left in poor neighborhoods. I'm Santita Jackson. Those are some of my headlines. Let's get to what happened in Georgia. Boy, we've been talking with attorney C.K. Hoffler, the president of the National Bar Association and the chair of Rainbow Push. And we've been talking with Pastor Todd Urey, vice president of Rainbow Push, and the pastor, senior pastor of the Douglas Memorial Community Church, one of the iconic churches in Baltimore. And we are, of course, we welcome back to the show, as we often do with all of this wonderful crew, attorney Mark Fancher, brilliant civil libertarian and civil rights lawyer. And, of course, let's start things off with Dave Daly, the author of Rat Aft, Why Your Vote Doesn't Count, and Unrigged, How Americans are fighting back to save our democracy. You've been writing about this for years. What happened in Georgia? As I wish Adrian Paul a happy birthday. First, say happy birthday to Adrian Paul, David Daly, and then you go.
Happy birthday, Adrian Paul. Happy birthday to you. Oh, yeah.
Oh, I love
Happy
it.
birthday, Adrian.
Come on now. I love it. What happened in Georgia? I need something to lighten things up. Happy birthday, girl. Talk to me. What happened?
Yeah.
Come on, you've been warning about this. What happened?
What happened in Georgia is that on January 5th, the state elected 2 Democratic senators, and this was the product of years of organizing against various voter suppression efforts in the state of Georgia by civil rights groups, by progressive activists, and they finally won. And once you win, the forces who are lined up against democracy in this country don't stop. They come up with new barriers. They raise them a little bit higher. And so this is what you are seeing now around the country. On January 6th, right, you had a mob attack the U.S. Capitol, insurrectionists in MAGA caps and QAnon costumes who ransacked the Capitol. That was followed, however, by a majority of the Republican House caucus who gave the mob what they wanted when they voted against certifying the results of the presidential election from Pennsylvania and from Arizona. And now that mob has extended itself into state legislatures around the country. these are, quite frankly, insurrectionists in suits and ties, and they are targeting voters of color in states that are super close. So what you are seeing are these bills in Arizona, in Georgia, in Texas, in Iowa, in Pennsylvania, in New Hampshire. And they're using the big lie that's been pushed by Donald Trump and the Republican Party. Using this big lie, these repeated, baseless claims of voter fraud, creating a false sense among Republican voters that our elections are not legitimate, and then using the fears that they themselves have created as a pretext for these new and horrifying voter restrictions. This is every bit as vile an assault on our democracy as what we saw at the Capitol on January 6th. And it is very much a new effort at Jim Crow, except this is Dr. James Crow, and he's got a PhD in data science, and he knows the exact hours that Black voters and Latino voters and young people vote. He demands the specific ID that he knows these voters don't have. This is targeted, this is specific, and this is deeply dangerous to the idea of representative democracy.
Attorney Mark Fancher, how do you react to this new law?
Well, one of the virtues of people, white people of goodwill, liberals and progressives, and communities of color, which is also something that is a detriment to them, is that they're very decent people. They really want the right thing. They believe in fairness. They believe in justice and all of those kinds of things. And they find it really, really hard to imagine that anybody could not be the way that they are in terms of their decency, their basic understanding of fairness and justice and all of those kinds of things. But I really try and see America for what it is. And what I see is an entire segment of the country which is not fair, which is not decent, which is not just, and which is at war. Absolute, total, all-out, raw war, against people who are in some way on the other side of what they want. And they will stop at nothing. January 6th gave us a glimpse of how they really feel. And I think Mr. Daley here has laid it out very clearly and explained that that's not just something that happened outside of the Capitol, that it manifests inside of the halls of legislatures. It manifests in police departments when officers beat the ever-loving daylights out of people of color, or if necessary, they'll just outright kill them. It manifests in every aspect of life, but we tend to look at all of this through rose-colored glasses. So when a legislator goes and politely knocks on a door expecting, that no decent person would deny her entry, no decent and fair person would not allow her to just enter the door after she's knocked politely, then what she finds is the reaction of people who are at war. And she is arrested and charged with felonies. So because they're responding with no pity, no mercy, no sense of decency, I really think it falls to those of us who are decent to go to war also. That does not mean that we go out and establish an arsenal for ourselves or develop guerrilla war battle plans, but we do need to call upon our spirituality, our insight, our wisdom to develop some methods and means which are calculated to destabilize the war effort that's underway against us. And we need to recognize certain key critical things that I think that people who have come before us understood intuitively, if not explicitly. One is that those who seek to oppress do so because they want to maintain their convenience and their comfort. And they become very destabilized when there is anything that's done that takes them out of their comfort zone, which takes them out of the routine. And so Dr. King, when he began his demonstrations, when SNCC began sit-ins, this was at the time very uncomfortable for them. It destabilized them. And we need to think of ways of making them uncomfortable now. That may not involve sit-ins. It may not involve marches. It may not involve tactics that have been used in the past, because now they've grown accustomed to that. And that's very comfortable for them when we do things that we've done before. But we need to figure out ways to make them uncomfortable. The other thing is that we need to understand that we need to break out of their paradigm. They've created a political structure. They've created a political process which they dominate, which they control absolutely, and which they know that if we try and play the game, they will be effective in frustrating whatever efforts that we make. And we need to look for ways of changing things that are outside of that structure, things that have nothing to do with them whatsoever, that involve people that never are part of this process, people from other countries who are not part of this process, but nevertheless have something to offer to us in terms of our ongoing efforts to bring about the kind of just society that we want. And it's until we develop a war mentality that we will continue to be shocked and surprised by something that shouldn't shock us anymore. They've demonstrated very clearly who they are and what they're doing, and we've got to stop looking at this through rose-colored glasses.
Well, let me go to the veteran on the panel, Reverend Dr. Todd Erie Esquire. We're at war for our vote, for our freedoms, right?
Well, let me sum up the war in 3 words. We're in the phase of the war called to be continued. Somewhere along the line, we lost a grip on what informed the founding document. The first 3 words of the preamble, we the people, was not an all-inclusive egalitarian phrase. It was encoded with deferential power to a particular group of people to the exclusion of all others. Over time, that document has had to be stretched and expanded to be more inclusive. And so when you get to the post-Civil War amendments, 13, 14, 15, when you get to the 19th Amendment that allows for women's suffrage, when we start looking at how we've gotten to this place, this isn't because the Constitution was an inclusive document by design. That's not what it is. That's not what it ever has been. So we have to get out of this euphoric notion that somehow or other we've created nostalgia around a document that was discriminatory on its face. The second thing is that this notion, the big lie has now been scapegoated. Here's what's going on in Georgia. You got a governor who's the former Secretary of State who manipulated his role to be able to beat Stacey Abrams, who led the movement to actually put 2 Democratic U.S. senators from Georgia in the United States Senate. He recognizes that he has an election coming up too. And if the momentum that led to Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff's election were to continue into 2022, he is now term limited by the outcome of the election. He's got self-interest attached to this. And so when we start asking these questions, it helps now, and this is where Madam Chair, C.K. Hoffler, and Attorney Mark Fancher, and David Daley, we know we're now in a season of what I would call litigation and legislation. We paid so much attention to who was going to get the big chair. We didn't pay enough attention to what was going on down ballot. And so now you see in state legislatures across the country, these regressive, overtly hostile policies against voting rights being passed and signed so quickly that the updated draft, the ink doesn't have time to dry. I'm sure that Governor Kemp had to try to avoid smearing the ink on the paper. He was just so eager to be able to sign that bill into law on last night. So let's not be demystified and shocked that somehow or other the fabric of the country is rising up. It's always been the moral compass of folks of goodwill, as Attorney Mark Fancher talks about this notion of our spirituality guiding us, because that has been the thing that has had to be the conscience of a nation that was designed by, in some ways, if you look at the history, if you look at property law, a lot of property law is based on fraud and these specious principles that said we're going to create a framework that allows us to determine who can and who cannot take land. But the same thing about political power, who spends public dollars and for what reasons. That's the conversation from President Biden's press conference on yesterday. What are his priorities? There is this innate fear that when you have $2 trillion of public funds passing through state legislative processes, they don't want to give way to the transfer of resources toward interests that do not speak to the implicit priorities of not just the U.S. Constitution, but also state constitutions as well. And so I would say to Madam Chair's point while we were coming in to the second hour, is that you are going to see some lawsuits. That's why the president couldn't speak to a whole lot on yesterday, because he's going to need Benita Gupta and Kristen Clark to be able to help push back on some of this. And he cannot play his hand too quickly. Otherwise, he's going to run into problems on the confirmation. And so we've got to think about this more carefully, be ready to engage at whatever level. And in the meantime, whatever obstacles that might be put up, we need to have a response that still ensures that we're going to take advantage of every opportunity to vote, and we're not going to use resistance as an excuse for not voting. We still have an obligation. We still have an opportunity.
Attorney C.K. Hoffler, the final 2 minutes in this segment belong to you.
Well, I agree with what Dr. Yuri said as it relates to the fact that we have to persevere and not use these stumbling blocks as an excuse not to vote. Because I think that is what the expectation is, that this law somehow will prevent people from voting, because that's what it's designed to do. It's designed to make it very difficult. So until there's a passage of a federal law, we need the federal protections when this happens. Until there's a passage of a federal law that would obliterate or wipe out a lot of this voter suppression, we have to mobilize our communities to learn how to vote within these restrictions, these draconian measures, because what is at stake is our democracy. If Raphael Warnock and if others throughout this country do not get back in power in the Senate, the president and vice president will not have the ability to address fundamental issues, to pass fundamental laws that will protect Americans, because they will not have a majority in the Senate. So they will not have the ability to govern this country in the way that we desperately need at this time. So I think that we have to look at the big picture. We have to fight. The litigation is what's going to make a difference until there is a Voting Rights Act that's sustainable. Litigation. And that's why there's already been one lawsuit filed. And I anticipate that there are going to be many lawsuits filed. I'm part of a group that is now contemplating litigation as well, as you can imagine. So there are going to be many lawsuits filed to try to stop this, to try to curtail this, to try to reverse this, to try to limit this in Georgia. But we've got to proceed on all fronts. We've got to make sure we educate our community on how to vote if this is indeed going to be a law that stays on the books, because at issue is democracy.
Everybody,
at stake is democracy.
At stake is democracy. Your vote, everybody. And look, I repeat, it's not just Georgia. Georgia has done us a favor. They have shown us where this can go. Well, we're going to criminalize third-party groups who hand out food and water to people standing in line. There is so much in this bill. And then what about the state representative who was arrested, who now has a case? She has 2 felony counts that have been leveled against her for trying to represent her people. What do you think about that? It could happen anywhere, and guess what? It's happening everywhere. We've got to get up, everybody. Please pay attention to what's happening in Georgia. Call me at 773-763-WCPT. I'll be back with more for Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. All right, everybody, we've got a couple of minutes. Well, thank you, Georgia. And happy birthday, Adrienne. I hope that you have the most marvelous of birthdays. I guess that makes you an Aries. Yes, you're just right behind my mother, my brother, and my niece. I got a lot of March birthdays in my family, like a lot of September and October. Librans and Pisces run things in our house. So it's good to be with you today. Wow, what a mess, CK. What about the state representative? I mean, she's got a case. How did that work?
She's got a case. She's got a right. She's got. Well, I have to tell you, she's going to have to defend against criminal charges, and I'm sure there will be people volunteering their efforts all around the world. But she also has a civil case. She has a civil case that should be explored because what happened to her? I mean, just think of. I mean, it's she has a civil case because I'm not quite sure of the validity of the efforts that were used to lock her out of the State House. You know, ironically, when we were serving the Secretary of State and the governor with our lawsuit, we were knocking on the door of the governor's office, and eventually they opened. We did the exact same thing. The only difference is we were a group of lawyers.
You know
The
what?
exact same thing.
Hold on. This sounds like a wonderful mystery story. This is something you can write about, David Daly. I mean, she's knocking on the door, and she said, "Wait a minute. Are you serious right now? You're about to arrest me?" Are you-
Well, did you see the picture of Governor Kemp signing the bill? I mean, it was very clear who was going to be allowed in that room. He's surrounded by a bunch of white men. She wasn't going to be allowed anywhere near that. That simple picture, I think, speaks so much about what happened yesterday.
Oh, absolutely. When we get back up, look, she's got a case.
The senator being arrested at the door while the white men in the big office and the fancy chair take away voting rights. I mean, it ought to be put up against each other on the front page of every paper in the newspaper in the country today.
I hope people pay attention. I mean, Mark, do you think people are paying attention?
Oh yeah, I think so. But I also think, I mean, I could be wrong, but I think those charges are going to go away real quick. I mean, if I had the skill, I would love to defend her, and if I were charged with those things, I would love to go to trial on something like that.
Why?
I mean, if you could make the state look so silly, and I think that a smart prosecutor is going to recognize that those charges are not going to go anywhere good for the people that prosecute that case.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean they still have to have a proper to even turn it into a case. They have arrest charges, and so the process of getting it. I would just say here's what I would love about this is I want to see what the discovery is. I want to hear the rationale. I want to hear how they're interpreting the law and how this elected officials' actions violated some law that says in the state capitol, someone who's elected to work in the capitol can't walk through the capitol. I'm waiting for that one. I'm waiting to hear how Georgia, with all of the corporate interests that are headquartered in Georgia, how they're going to frame this. Because I promise you, what you will begin to see is this will no longer be an insular discussion amongst the political types. It's going to end up being an economic discussion because the corporations are going to start getting heat. Why do you keep your operations in a state that overtly and unapologetically oppresses people?
Oh, Coca-Cola needs to come out with a statement today. They better. The Atlanta
They
team.
do.
They need to come out with a statement. Well, no, hold on, because we're about to come right back up because I want you all to speak to that, and then I want to go to these callers because they got to do something. I believe in, economic boycotts. I was kind of weaned on that. That needs to happen.
And Santita, don't forget, I'll get to the top and I got
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show, talking about Georgia, talking about a Georgia state representative who was arrested, who now has a case, 2 felonies leveled against her because she was trying to witness the signing of this the rollback of this voting bill that rolled back voting rights. I mean, everybody makes it a crime for third-party groups to hand out food and water to voters standing in line. It blocks the use of mobile voting vans. It curtails the use of drop boxes for absentee ballot. It allows electors to challenge the eligibility of an unlimited number of voters, and they're engaging in self-dealing. CK. I mean, now these representatives in the legislature have given themselves a right to oversee the election process. I mean, how does that work? That's self-dealing. I thought the Secretary of
It
State
is.
was supposed to do that. Explain what happened very quickly before we go to the callers.
Well, just very quickly, they're judge, jury, and executioner because the Secretary of State in their mind messed up and allowed all these people, black, brown, young people to vote, Asian Americans to vote, and it made a difference. They said, we've got to stop that. And just in case the Secretary of State messes up again, we need to take power and control. That's number one. But number two, after the charges levied against the Democratic lawmaker, this black woman who was merely knocking on the door to see if she could witness the signing and be a part of it, they've got to come to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office, led by Fani Willis. Good luck with that. They're going to have. I'd love to see what kind of case they're going to make before this district attorney's office, who believes in fairness and justice. This is the same district attorney who the Secretary of State went to when former President Trump called him in an effort to corrupt the results of the Georgia election. So good luck with that for them. That's what I'd say. Good luck with that.
Well, they did us a favor by charging Georgia State Representative Park Gannon with 2 felonies. Wow. She was arrested. I mean, and she said, "Are you serious right now?" I mean, Mark, before I go to these callers, I mean, and excuse me, let me hold on. Let me jump over here. Reverend Dr. Yuri, I know you're going to have to leave, right?
Yeah, gotta get ready to head to the airport.
Your closing thought. Yes.
Yeah, to Madam Chair's point, here's the issue. The messaging, you try to lock somebody out because you don't want this to be a public announcement. They wanted to do this in a scripted way that facilitated what I would say is a conspiracy against the interests of the voting public. And so as we continue, they just let the cat out of the bag. The messaging is now beyond their control. We must seize the moment and highlight and spotlight what's going on in Georgia so that as we look at these other states, these other 42 that are trying to follow suit, that we begin to apply the pressure to protect the interests of those who have to have free and uninhibited access to the ballot box.
Reverend Dr. Todd Yuri, Esquire, Vice President, Rainbow Push, and the chair of the not chair, the senior pastor of the iconic Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore, Maryland. Thank you so much for being with us. Traveling mercies and grace to you today. Blessings.
Thank you. Always good to be with you.
Always a joy. Always a joy. Alfredo, you've been holding on for a minute. What's on your mind? Alfredo? Thank you for calling. Yes, thank you for calling.
Santita?
Yes, thank you for calling.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for taking my call. I've been listening to you for a while. The only thing I want to say, a little comment, is that, we are in a de facto civil war.
Why do you say that?
If you read, well, because of the actions, your panel said it all, really. They gave you, all the conditions we have right now, the invasion of the Capitol, these laws that they're passing. So, the gloves are off, and I just think that we have to fight back.
So let me ask you this, Alfredo. Do you feel? I mean, just because I want to know, just because we're all walking around here, do you feel that this is? Do you feel? Is that something that you feel when you're talking to people? Do you feel a hardened line between people who feel one way politically or who believe another way politically? Is that what you're seeing in America today?
Well, yeah, it's not. It's not like me. I'm not against anybody. I don't hate anybody. But I would say it's the other side. The demographics are changing in this country, and that's going to have a long-term effect. And it can get very bad. Like I said, Santita, if you read the foreign press, like from England, from France. I have a friend that reads the French press and the Chinese press, in fact. And he says, yeah, that's what they're calling it out. There's a civil war in the United States, and it can get very ugly.
That's what, and they are saying this in papers all around the world. You're right.
Yes, they are.
I mean, the Chinese are saying you all have domestic problems. You all have a civil war on your hands. They are saying that. And remember, they are the top trading partner of Europe now. So can you imagine the kind of business argument, Alfredo, that they are making to the European Union? We are a more stable country than the United States now, right?
No.
Thank you
Yes,
for
they
that.
are. Yes, they are. Exactly.
I mean,
So here, my thought is that okay, now watching Joe Biden do, like obviously I'm not a Trump voter, but if Trump was in the White House, he would be threatening to withholding, federal funds if they pass these laws.
Okay.
You know, just the threat of something is better than nothing. We have to fight back. I don't want a civil war. I want people to start shooting, but we can't just sit, and expect things to get better. And there's a bunch of things we can do.
Like what?
We're also, because, for example, we're in this country, I have lived abroad, and honestly, what I see, we are conditioned in this country not to think. I don't know if you agree. I think you have friends in other countries, and they pretty much will tell you the same thing. We're kind of like boxed in. We can't, we're not allowed to think critically.
Look, I'm with you. We're not allowed to ask questions. I mean, you see that, quite frankly,
Exactly.
around everything. And that's why I try to push the envelope
Yes.
about everything that we talk about. I mean,
Right.
including, you see this, if we can have open discussions about everything and respectful discussions, because
Yes.
that requires maturity now. We've got to
Right.
create. I've tried to help create here, and all of you have helped to do this.
Mhm.
I tried to create help have a comfortable space where we can have uncomfortable conversations. We've got to do that. That's the
Right.
only way, because everybody doesn't think the way that you do. Your closing thought, Alfredo.
No, absolutely not. You know what? Just real quickly, a 10-year-old could design a vote-by-phone system that could be secure. A 10-year-old can do that, okay? So we're not even talking about that. That's okay. Maybe someday we'll do that. And also, yesterday we were talking about guns. We're not going to do away with guns, but we have to regulate and control them. And people are still thinking of, oh, well, wait a minute. Should we control guns? Should we regulate? Yes. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, come on.
Well,
Okay.
and we're going to have to. Thank you, Alfredo. Thank you and thank you for listening.
Thanks very much.
Blessings to you. And
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to have to engage in some self-control, too. Anita, what's on your mind today? Anita?
Good morning.
Hey, Anita. It's always a joy to hear your voice. Yes.
Okay. Well, blessing to be with Reverend Jesse Jackson through you. I have to speak up for Reverend Jackson and the civil rights movement. And I don't think the American people have been very loyal to it. And this is why these groups are rising up and they're feeling the hypocrisy of the American people. They want to be rich, but they don't want to follow the values that Reverend Jackson has continued to put into the system of Dr. Martin Luther King. And I don't blame the Republican Party. I would rise up, too, because I wouldn't pay for hypocrisy. That's a lot to pay. And I'm not going to blame the Republican Party. I'm going to blame the people that don't follow your father the way they should. And then things happen, and they want to whine and cry. And then they put Reverend Jackson in the way of danger, and including your brother. They put the Congressman, Reverend Jesse Jackson Jr., in danger by not doing that, because he really, really took a real good spiritual leadership in his government position. And that south side of Chicago was really changing. I lived there for all my life pretty much, and it was a lot of crime there, a lot of desolation. And your brother was bringing hope there. The people voted 98% for him in elections and things. And the people don't follow through. They don't come out to the meetings at the PTO meetings. They don't come out to city hall meetings. They don't do the things they're supposed to do. Then they get mad at the Republicans. And I think that's not fair to the Republicans either.
Well, you know what, David Daly? I think you're making beyond talking about my brother who was my congressman, and that's, I'm going to, in this context, refer to him as Congressman Jackson. It really, and Chicago's a little interesting because, you have the Bears, you have the White Sox, the Cubs, and you have politics, right? I mean, this is just what we do. David Daly, we really have to get involved and stay involved and be vigilant so that we can be in the fight. Because it seems to me that Republicans, or the powerful, the powerful never get out of the fight. David Daly, I mean, you've brought us so much information.
No, I think
Like 50, our 50 senators, the Democratic senators, represent 41 million more people. I don't know why these are not talking points.
What I think is so important for us to understand, and I think the rest of the panel has done such a marvelous job of putting this in historical context today. This country has not been a straight line forward on progress for voting rights. You know, there is the sense that, oh, well, you know, there's the Civil War, and then you've got the Reconstruction Amendments and the voting right, you know, and the 19th Amendment and the Voting Rights Act, and that shows a straight line of progress, when in reality, there's been a backlash to every single bit of progress forward. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments after the Civil War that ended slavery and guaranteed black citizenship and the right to vote were met by the Jim Crow era and the enshrinement of white supremacy into state constitutions across the South, in Mississippi, in Alabama, in Florida, in Georgia, in Tennessee. Much of that is still there today and affecting people in their right to vote now. And so whenever there is a step forward and a victory, the power structure then works to undo it. You could see this in Florida in 2018, right, where 64% of the people come together to end felony disenfranchisement, which is one of those Jim Crow relics dating back to Florida's state constitution back in the 1880s that makes it a felony. A felony conviction takes away your voting rights in the state of Florida forever, and then they add black codes on top of that, and they say that felonies are most likely to be these things, these crimes that the poor people in Florida in 1880 are most likely to commit. And that law is still on the books in 2018, more than 120 years later, affecting people all the way to this day. A mighty moral coalition comes together in Florida. Democrats, Republicans, independents. You can't pass anything in Florida with a 64% of the vote these days, right? It's a 50-50 state, as we've seen in so many elections over time. But to the people, this was a question of basic fairness. And Florida's legislature, Florida's gerrymandered state legislature, which already doesn't look like the people of the state, comes back and they effectively add a poll tax on top of this constitutional amendment that voters in the state passed in order to give people back their voting rights. And Florida's legislature says, okay, well, that's fine. As long as all of the fines and fees have been paid, then you can get your right to vote back. Well, that could be hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the state couldn't even tell people how much money that they owed. And so every time there's one of these victories, there's going to be a backlash. I mean, Dr. King talked about the arc of moral justice being, of the moral universe being long but bending towards justice. You know, it doesn't bend towards justice automatically. It only bends towards justice when all of us have our hands on it and are pulling it in that direction together and don't take our hands off of it, because there are people trying to bend that arc the other way.
Well, he did say it's not a straight shot, Mark. You got to bend this thing.
Absolutely.
You have to actively, and we have to actively get involved. I mean, because when I was so proud of the state representative. Was it Park? CK? I was so proud of her last night, and she just said, "No, you know what? You're going to have to arrest me. You're going to have to do that because you're wrong for this." And there should be, to me, Mark, much more outrage about him signing this law in secret. In secret.
Yeah, but not just outrage, but analysis. You know, the process of liberation begins with liberating the mind. And I think that's what's holding so many of us back, that part of what has been used to keep us down is our belief that our liberation depends upon a process which has been designed to oppress us. And so when we see that our voting rights are threatened, then we freak out, because in our minds, this is the only path forward. This is the only thing that we can do. If we lose our right to vote, then all is lost. And so therefore, we must focus on that. But while we're focused on that, our enemies are focused on a bunch of other things. They're focused on keeping us physically under control with the police. They're focused on keeping us economically down through various means and methods. They're focused on controlling our allies or would-be allies overseas militarily. They're focused on a whole lot of other things, and we're focused on this one little thing. So we've got to liberate our minds. The other thing that we have to liberate our minds from is this perception or belief that we have that we are not powerful. You know, a few minutes ago, our brother Alfredo touched on what this is really all about, and that is the changing demographics of this country. What you have is a population of people who perceive themselves as becoming rapidly outnumbered by all of these colored folks. They're coming across the southern border. They're coming in boats from Haiti. They're coming from other countries. You know, they're not coming from the places where we'd love them to come from, you know, up in the Nordic countries where the good people are. And I think, if nothing else, Donald Trump gave us a window into the thinking of this segment of the U.S. population. So they're fighting desperately in order to preserve themselves, and they'll do anything that they have to do. But all of this changes for us in terms of our perspective if we look clearly at what we have. What we look at clearly is that the demographics are changing. There are more and more people of color who are populating this country who think in a different way. There are white people of goodwill who are prepared to link arms with these people. There are people in other countries around the world who understand what we're going through and who stand ready to be allies with us. The entire African continent is ripe for Pan-Africanism, for taking the mineral wealth of Africa from the hands of foreign corporations and foreign interests which dominate it, and putting it into the hands of people who believe in justice for people around the world. You know, the conditions are ripe for a global rainbow coalition of the kind that Reverend Jackson was so inspired to think of and to know was the path forward. So you take people of all colors, of goodwill, united globally, and then they tap into the power of God Almighty. This little group of people, which has caused such misery and angst and frustration and anger for us, becomes very tiny and very controllable and very manageable. But it requires us to open our eyes and liberate our minds.
Amen to that. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, you are in our legal lane. What is next? I mean, and it's State
Well, I think
Representative Park Cannon. Park Cannon.
Cannon.
So what, I mean, well, let's start with her. What is she up against?
Well, she's up against felony charges, but I agree with a previous speaker that said they probably won't stick for this reason. If the district attorney of Fulton County has anything to say about it, she's going to insist that there be due process and that there be evidence. And I can't imagine, because I just can't imagine, what could possibly be the justification for arresting her at that point. I would just say to your listeners, to your audience, and to those who are tuning in, we had a situation where we were trying to serve the Secretary of State about 3 months ago relative to the disenfranchisement of close to 200,000 Georgians that were illegally stricken from the rolls. We went to the Secretary of State's office, which is right across the hall from the governor's office, and we were told that he wasn't there. And this is, of course, during the height of COVID. And then we went to the governor's office, and we, too, knocked on the door. I mean, we weren't unruly, but a group of lawyers knocking on the door, and we had our own press there. And we knocked on the door, and they did. You know, law enforcement came, and we looked at them as if to say, and your point is? And, of course, nothing happened. And, in fact, I sat in the governor's living room area for about 45 minutes with Robert Patillo, Maria Banjo. All of us were lawyers. Robert Patillo representing Rainbow Push Coalition, one of the clients in that case. And, of course, nothing happened, but we did the exact same thing. And so there is, as far as I can see, I don't see where the illegality is. She works in that building. This was not to be a secret signing. This is not the White House. So I think that it would be interesting seeing what charges are levied. I believe that she may have civil claims that she can file against law enforcement and the governor's office that ordered her to be arrested. Absolutely. And I'm very certain that there are lawyers throughout the country, throughout Georgia, throughout the world, who would volunteer their services to protect her and to defend her, because she was merely asking to be included on something that is horrific, and they did not want her included, and she had every right to be there. She's a lawmaker representing the citizens of Georgia. I mean, what are we doing here?
Do you know what? I tell you what Kemp did. Governor Kemp did us a favor. He helped us to see just how close we are to victory, David Daly. You got to get his books, Rat Effed, Why Your Vote Doesn't Count, and Unrigged, How Americans are Battling Back to Save Our Democracy. The final minute belongs to you. Well, minute and a half belongs to you, David Daly, because you've been, CK and Mark, he's been writing about this, sounding the alarm. Sounding the alarm. You fight on this issue every day, CK. You've got 66,000 lawyers who are at the ready fighting in all of our states and territories about this every day. Mark, this is your life's work.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
What do you foresee? What's next? Because this is the plan. This is the playbook, David Daly. You've been writing about it. This is the playbook.
We've got two bills right now.
No, it's exciting. This gets us up, So CK,
there are two bills right now. You've got the For the People Act and you've got the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. What we need to do is we need federal action right now that is going to shore up the right to vote against a Republican Party that has fundamentally broken faith with democracy and is radicalizing against the very idea of majoritarian rule. And this is going to require breaking the filibuster, because there quite simply are not 60 senators who are going to pass this legislation. Democrats have got what could be a once-in-a-generation opportunity here to step forward and pass these laws, the John Lewis voting rights extension that would restore the full protection of the Voting Rights Act that the U.S. Supreme Court has undone. It would help inoculate us against these kinds of state-based voter suppression efforts by restoring pre-clearance. And this is what's got to happen, and it's got to happen right now.
Everybody, we've got a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. But the beautiful thing is, this is waking us up. This is waking us up. And as you continue to remind us, Mark, you know what? I am somebody. You got to keep hope alive. And you are transformed by the renewing of your mind. Slavery starts in the head first. That's why it's a head game. And Americans are going to have to wake up. We have to decide whether we're going to be slave or free, whether we are going to have freedom, justice, and liberty for all. So the fight in Georgia is everyone's fight. It's all our fight. Thank you, State Representative Park Cannon, for daring them to arrest you. Now you've got a case, but now you've got a greater case to build for the American people about the vote. Because remember, Governor Kemp is the man who stole the seat from Stacey Abrams. And maybe he cannot forgive the fact, C.K. Hoffler and Mark Fancher and David Daly, he can't forgive the fact that he hasn't defeated her. She never conceded, you guys. And she's never conceded, not just on paper, but in practice. She continues to push every day. And so you must do the same. I'll see you on Keep Hope Alive on Sunday on the Santita Jackson. Well, on Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson, and on Monday on the Santita Jackson Show. Thank you for blessing me with your support. You all are such jewels, and I feel so privileged, so honored, so blessed to be able to share my time with you, time and space, every day. God bless you, everybody. Enjoy the weekend, and happy birthday, Adrian Paul. God bless you, everybody. Love you much. Mark Fancher, David Daly, C.K. Hoffler, I love you all so much.
Well, likewise, but
Dale dropped it, seems.
Well, you know what? I mean, and David put a little soul in it. I'm loving it. I said, oh, the
I know, and
romantic.
I couldn't follow that act.
I
And
said,
if I tried to, it would have killed your show.
No,
Everybody would have tuned out.
I said, go ahead, David. I mean, I said, he's a real romantic. I said, nah, yeah, that's how he got that wife. I'm not mad at him. He said, oh, no, I'm going to groove it in. I love it. I love you. I love you, Mark Fancher, for all that you are and all that you do. David Daly, I love you for all that you are and all that you do. And CK Hoffler, I love you for all that you are and all that you do. I'm going to leave you all, everybody. You know what? We're working where we live. We live at work now, and I've got to go into a Zoom call. Help me, Holy Ghost. I love you, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us today, Mark Fancher and C.K. Hoffler and David Daly. Thank you, Dylan. Everybody, God bless you. I'll see you I'll see you on Sunday. Right. And then next week. God bless you, everybody. Thank you so much, Mark.